Okay.
Just,
Okay.
just the introduction to it.
Well, so like after the conversation last week, and then my concern was, are we moving too far in in my direction? Um, and I don't think we are. That's just out of concern of like this is an equal partnership. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But um, so this was thinking about like the whole life's work question, I guess, and then getting back, how's that integrate into the self-study work, the LET. um uh so then what are the big areas of thought that I think about all the time, really, is what this kind of boils down to. And then the idea of working it through with a lot of this came started nah this probably didn't this started back here. This was more here, really getting close, probably when we did the pivot towards the arts. Whenever that was, I like, what was that, 22. So this idea of moving towards some idea of the big things for me, this doesn't necessarily have to be the us, but I think it certainly fits together, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So the really, look at the 5 pillars of thought, really are like, there's 3 whats, 1 how, and then the big why. So the things I'm interested in anyway: creation of and integration of the arts, um, people's collective and individual lives, capacity building, which really some of that's a lot, it's art related, but certainly the self studies capacity building, creativity, using creativity, um, then so those are the three big. These are the what's. The how is sort of the reflective leadership, and this is what the arts. It's almost reciprocity in the sense that like the reflective leadership is really defined by the artistic thinking, the stuff we were talking about last week, but it's also forming each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all that, and almost even lately been thinking in that piece, the reflective leadership. Also, I've been doing a little bit of looking for stuff in the artist as philosopher, and there's not much of that out there. So that's an interesting area I think to get into. And then finally, the big why is creating equity by helping people be their true selves through discovery, development, and leveraging of unique capacities. And I guess that goes to me is just a sort of a core belief that everybody's a creator. Everybody has the potential to be an artist, whether a musician or writer or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So this just seemed like it made sense to talk about in light of the kind of the thinking from the other day about the becoming the artful leadership, the dialogues, and what they're really about. So I don't know, just seemed like something that was I wanted to share with you and get your thoughts. And
So when did you write this?
it's been ongoing. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly when the last edit would have been, but look at that's the great thing about Google Docs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, so the creation of the document was, oh wait, no, this version was January 9th of 23. So this document started December 31st of 21.
Oh, wow.
So it's been something it's been working on for quite some time. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I have a lot of these that just things keep evolving, and a lot of it comes from will be some thoughts, and then again, I don't know if I'm comfortable with this idea of like thought leader necessarily. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's really what we are, is thought leadership. And I really thought, going back to like the idea last week where we were the artful leaders, which again, I love that idea. Um, and you know, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of versions on here, I guess.
So I think when I went back in the Gmail and I looked at like uh, all of our meeting, right?
Yeah.
We have clearly the dissertation, and you're talking to me about vested committee meeting dates
Uh huh.
back in like 2017.
Yeah.
And then, like 2018, we were talking about, you were finishing up, we were looking at the castle for the first time,
Yeah.
thinking about that. In 2020, in the midst of COVID, but I remember this, we started having conversations. Because you were in Charlotte, weren't you?
When was this?
Like 2020,
Oh yeah, yeah.
summer of
2020,
2020. So
July 24th, 2020 in Charlotte. That would have
so,
been that'd be the summer of the height of COVID, basically.
so we started having conversations about CPED.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking to each other about, if this conference actually happened in 2020 for CPED, should we try and submit? Should we try to go?
Uh,
And that was well before myself, you thought we would be working in the doctoral program in the EDD.
yeah.
So I like
Well,
that was just a funny, like, kind of rediscovery, putting that together.
I
But
rem
so yeah, go ahead.
I remember at some phase through and I know I'm just one of your many dissertations, but like at some point I had a lot in there about the EDD, and a big chunk of the portion with the EDD was about CPED and the idea of reimagining, what the ED is, and that idea that really motivated me was the practitioner's degree. And that was kind of what got me, that's what the whole self-study thing stuck. And I remember thinking for a lot of, like, in my mind, it was sort of framed up as the ultimate practitioner's degree, right? Like this is like, I don't know that I could have finished if it didn't have daily pertinence, you know what I mean? And still now it's still like in continuing on, but like, it is funny continuing, go back to, like, it feels like the further we go, the more it evolves into a more and more comfortable, no, I was never uncomfortable, but you know what I mean? Like, I like it more, I guess. And probably getting back to myself, I guess that's the James Joyce quote, think you're escaping and run into yourself. Longest way around is the shortest way home. I feel like the more we have these honest conversations, the more it comes back around to ending up, like, and the music conversation the other day was fun, but like, that's an important part of things.
Well, I think it's one of your pillars, this idea of, you know, identity. And I think
Yeah.
finding, finding your passions, and when you're going to talk about whole child or whole person,
Yeah.
we are not just one thing. We are not
Yeah.
just EDD students or
Yeah.
teaching in an EDD program, or, leaders in a school
Yeah.
running programs. We have other identities as well that need attention. And I think when you give those other identities, and those other passions attention, you do better at the leadership component.
Yeah. And I don't know how far we've even gone down um I fleshed out the stuff I got to do in Charlotte as far as equity,
Yeah,
and the stuff at the Gant, and it was all about, we tend to look at inequity as almost like financial,
right.
but we're also forcing millions of people, millions of children into this standardized assessment where we're forgetting about things like the arts. One of my core fights down there, and it was 100% supported by my boss, who was implementing the curriculum, but it was, now, how do we implement this curriculum and make sure we're still doing arts integration, was the core question. You know what I mean? So it was a good thing. But
Well, and at what time, when did you come back to PA, to Maryland, to teach?
well, July of 21, we moved back. So I started back at WCPS in July, I think 2nd of 2021.
Yeah, because it's just when I went back and kind of did the chronology. Now we obviously we use, you used your work email, I used my Frostburg email for a lot of things, and then we kind of made the transition to using the Gmail when we started our Google Classroom
Yeah.
to house all of our documents. But it's been interesting to just look back at the emails because there was a like just a blip of time where we were still in contact, but not as often, not as
Right.
and then like it's been, I mean, it's been years of pretty much, with the exception of some vacations, we've been in pretty steady contact. But
Yeah.
but but what I think's important about that is when you talk about your pillars, and that you started it in 2021, and that you've been updating and working on it up through 23, and you're sharing it now. I can like literally go into the email chain and look at documents that you were sending with me where we were talking about like framework mind maps and conceptual art related to the self-study. And these were all things post your dissertation.
Uh-huh.
But
What is that one?
let me see
I'm
if I can,
curious.
yeah, here, hold on, I'll share. And
Oh, okay.
it's
Oh,
when we, can you see it?
well, I did, but I think it's when we start looking at artists.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to me, like that trajectory. We've been doing this for a long time, and it's just now kind of coming. Like I think that we're going to have to pull a lot of that data. I mean, that's artifact data that we have, and we're
Yeah.
probably going to need to frame some of that up.
Yeah. In the show, not the show that was at the university, connected to the university, but the other show, the more of like, which quote
Yeah,
unquote retrospective.
yeah,
It wasn't just the dissertation stuff, but the chairs in the circle
right.
is a piece called uh How Do You Know? And it's all about epistemology. The idea would be, and this is something we could maybe build into Hawaii, chairs in a circle, and it's like, how do you know? And it's just simple.
Yeah,
That's the question. And then record and transcribe what people are saying. It's very much like the vested committee, like going back through that, and then going back through this now that we're transcribing this. And when you read it back, there's 100 things you forget in the conversation, but when you read it back, it's there, and it makes more sense. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But that's a conceptual piece, I think, would be.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that could be very, and I don't, we don't know until we get there how many people will actually be in our group.
Mm-hmm.
I can ask ahead of time, but I think that doing a how do you know type question would be really good. I suspect we're going to get some students that
Mm-hmm.
are EDD students, doc students. But I don't know. How do I know? So yeah, I just think it might be interesting. Like I've been thinking this for a bit, that we're going to have to pull some of these, because
Almost to
I
be.
mean, we have hundreds of emails that have attachments of things that we wanted each other to read or something we were
Yeah.
talking about. But there is a definite turn in that 21, 22 period where art became really important.
I think it was. We had. I think it was one of the castles.
Yeah, I think that too.
And we talk about the pivot. My kid calling. I'll take this real quick.
Yeah.
Hello.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I think that would be good. I like the idea of a how do you know question. And I mean, and it could be framed around thinking about their,
I
could be, depending on the audience, could be a research question, could be how did you know the EDD versus a PhD?
uh-huh.
How do you know? How do you know what you know about yourself?
I think for this, I think it's probably be a little more structured. I would love to be just how do you know? And like,
Yeah.
how do people, and that, I mean, that's really the, you know, I don't think you're going to get much if I say, what's your epistemological framework? You know what I mean? But if it's out, how do you know? Not for this. I think it could be more guided for this kind of thing, but it becomes a thing. It's sort of a Socratic seminar, I guess. But when I look now, I look at the Artful Leaders the Artful Leaders, the Artful Leadership dialogues is definitely part of the reflective leadership. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that to me fleshes that concept out even more. You know what I mean? And I
Absolutely. Well, and when I read, particularly when I read the pillars and think about that idea, I mean, I think we have spent a lot of time talking about creative living
mm-hmm.
and what's the impact of creative living on our leadership, maybe our leadership styles, our perception of leadership, our perception of the people that we're leading, how are we impactful, so I think as much as I'm interested in the creation and integration of arts, I got really excited when I read your statement that had capacity building for whole child, whole person, because I think that's at the root of this, that we're thinking a lot about the people around us, not just ourselves, but our people living their most authentic life.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we would say as leaders, we are choosing is to not deny that creative aspect, that creative part of our lives in exchange for leadership.
So I would submit, again, I say this out of love and compassion, not criticism, not negative criticism, is there's a lot more management than leadership. And I think I hear a lot of it's Comar, it's the blueprint, or now I heard last week pending legislation. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, so it's not even a law yet, but we're going to change our process.
Well, and did you just hear that's like special ed, everybody's supposed to have their plan done by December, and special ed's been given 6 more months.
Oh, really?
Because they can't get a plan out of blueprint yet for that.
Right. But we're constantly changing things and making adjustments and changing the name of this meeting and that meeting, and we're asking questions and they don't have an answer. I'm saying I feel like, and again, people are in bad positions. You know what I mean? I'm saying it with really love and love and compassion, but we've got people in bad positions, and it's hard for them. I don't know. They're really functioning in a way that what they're doing is like just.
Well, and the article I just read that they've just passed that every county is going to get like somewhere to the tune of 150,000 to hire a blueprint coordinator.
Huh.
I thought I might.
We already have that. We already have a blueprint coordinator for us, so I guess that means that would be.
Well, the state's going to pay for it.
Maybe she'll be paid, and then maybe that gets us something back. But yeah, I don't know. But again, and that's part of the thing, and honestly, part of my trying to start a better year here is also, I think, back to getting to the core of who everybody is. For me, I got to do that for myself too, and not seek, but just think about things through the prism of creativity rather than this is going wrong and this is going wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was in a rough place from all last spring, late winter, spring, and I mean, it was I didn't view things as a problem to solve anymore. I just viewed things as another negative coming at me. You know what I mean?
Well, and I do think that this is part of what we, regardless of who our audience is, who our participants are in Hawaii, I think if they're students, they're getting an EDD, so that means they're working professionals, probably in some level of leadership position or management position. because I do think we need to talk about the difference between leadership and management. There is a lot of us out there that are in management positions. There's very few of us that are actually in what you and I would define as leadership positions. And I think part of what you and I talk about, probably the undercurrent is, we want to be leaders. We believe we have something that's valuable that would support our faculties, but so much of our day is spent managing. And I do think that would be a very interesting conversation for the podcast in Hawaii with other participants.
Yeah.
I do want to tell you before we stop, I want to tell you something exciting. So the other day, a colleague of mine who's had some just an interesting career, let's put it that way. And I'll ask you in a minute. The two of you probably knew each other or were around the same time. I think he was a little later in the program than you were, but he too is an EDD grad. But he shared that he's going to be writing about how good leadership and poor leadership experiences shape personal leadership style. And then he asked the questions, what did you learn to do? What did you learn not to do? And then he asked for people to share their stories. So I messaged him and just said, told him that we have our podcast and would he ever be interested in meeting with us? And he was wholeheartedly in and excited.
Oh, that'd be a great,
yeah.
I mean, that'd be great.
So we've got our first guest.
Okay.
I know you have your tapes too. I do want us to get those edited and up because we could use those as segue. You know what I mean? We could intersperse them. The interviews you did this summer.
Oh yeah. Okay. They would have to agree to that though. So we'll make sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have some work to do,
did
but
that in the class, but it was easy. That was so easy to do.
Yeah.
With anybody, just interview questions. It's more, those were more of interviews and I followed up questions, but it really truly wasn't dialectic. It'd be interesting though to I think, and there's probably a process where you would start interview, then move into like a dialectic thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely. So I called this is Artful Leaders podcast 2.
Okay.
So I'm gonna stop recording.